Is Vladimir Putin likely to listen to a later statement from the White House press secretary or the words of President Biden?
I will repeat myself. And I'm Vice President of the United States, and the President and I work closely together, and I know his position because he has been consistent in that regard. If Vladimir Putin and Russia takes aggressive action, it will be met with a cost that will be severe.
But both Ukraine and NATO aren't buying it. CNN reporting the next day that one NATO diplomat told them, quote, there is some truth to Biden's comments, but, quote, it didn't need to be said out loud. And just today, confirmation that the U.S. lethal aid to Ukraine has arrived in the country, along with orders for the U.S. embassy staff in Kyiv to evacuate. And here to react is former Ambassador Ric Grenell, the ambassador to Germany under President Trump, and a Newsmax senior national security analyst. Rick, thanks for being here. Obviously, a very complicated situation in Ukraine. I spoke to Mike McCall, who's the ranking member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee yesterday. He told me the GOP position is not to send troops to Ukraine. But could you shine a little light on what this aid is providing the Ukrainians right now?
Well, first of all, where to begin? This is such chaos. It's important to note right now, Logan, that we are in a situation where we have terrible and bad choices. And that's what we're having to choose between. And it's important to note that elections have consequences, and we weren't in this situation before. We are in this situation after just 1 year of Joe Biden pushing us to the brink like this. I'm actually... I've moved into the pissed off phase when it comes to foreign policy, because all the work that we did, whether it's the border, whether it's the Middle East, and now what we're seeing in Europe with NATO and NATO members is really frustrating. So I just want to start by saying we don't have any good choices. But the reality is that the leaders of Russia and China and a whole bunch of other places smell weakness. They see, I mean, you just played this clip of Kamala Harris. I mean, that was pathetic. She wasn't convincing anybody. She was barely getting through her talking points. And so what we're learning right now is there's a difference between a threat of military action and a credible threat, and this Biden team does not have a credible threat.
Now, we know there are already reports that the U.S. has evacuated or started to evacuate diplomats from Ukraine. Here's how Jen Psaki, the White House press secretary, responded when asked whether the White House had a good handle on how many Americans are left in Ukraine.
It's an open question around the world. We don't put a chip in Americans when they go to countries around the world and track their movements. People can register with the State Department. That's something they do, or they may choose not to register.
Now, this just seems like deja vu right here. We saw what happened in Kabul. Everybody should evacuate, those chaotic flights out. Is this going to be Afghanistan 2.0?
Yeah, I mean, really what Jen Psaki was saying is, you know, we don't have a plan, and so we really don't have a handle on the numbers. Look, as an ambassador in a country, that's one of your number one jobs, is protecting American citizens, getting them out. This should have been a plan of action a long time ago. We shouldn't even be in this situation where we're evacuating Americans. Remember, there is no ambassador. We have no ambassador in Ukraine. So you have lower level individuals trying to coordinate back with Washington. I can tell you from experience, I've been at the State Department for 11 years. The individuals who are in charge of our embassy in Ukraine right now are not making decisions on their own. They're going back and they're organizing with the Assistant Secretary for Europe, who is Karen Donfried, who used to work for the German Marshall Fund, where the Germans paid part of her salary. So this is a disaster situation all over. You've got the new Chancellor of Germany, Olaf Scholz, who has already snubbed President Biden and said, I don't want to coordinate. Biden invited him to talk about Ukraine, and he said no. Now we're seeing reports that the French and the Germans are going to organize with the Russians and the Ukrainians on their own. This is a disaster. The Americans have said we're going to follow the Europeans. We're not going to have an America First policy. We're going to have a European policy that will just stamp. I could go down the line and tell you story after story. The Germans aren't paying their NATO fair share, but yet now are telling Estonia, a member of NATO, that they can't supply weaponry to the Ukrainians. this is, where is American leadership? What is happening? Blinken is totally dismissed on the world stage, and so is Joe Biden.
Now, Ambassador, in about 30 seconds, we know that China, Russia, and Iran are conducting joint naval drills. We know that Ukraine does have somewhat of a port, but do you think that at this stage in the game, do you think that those joint drills are to scare Ukraine or to scare the United States of America with those three rogue nations coming together?
Well, they're designed to push back on NATO, to say to NATO, you know, that the Russians and others are not afraid of you. And what's the response? The Germans are literally undercutting NATO and telling other members of NATO to back down. It's terrible. NATO needs to speak up. Biden needs to do more.
And we actually do have a little bit of time, Ambassador Grenell. So in terms of this situation with the Russians, what do you want to see from Secretary of State Tony Blinken? We know he gave a press conference after President Biden's speech. Is he doing enough?
Look, to answer this question, you really, I just have to say again, I'm not happy that we're in this situation. You're leaving really bad choices to people like me when we have to answer these questions. I just have to say we wouldn't be in the situation if Donald Trump were the president. But now what I think you have to do is you have to say to the Germans, I'm sorry, but we're putting sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. You got to roll that back immediately. You got to say to member states in NATO, pay your fair share, otherwise we're not going to do anything. You've got to have consequences for bad behavior. And I would arm the Ukrainians, and I would make clear that we're not happy to be in this situation and that Putin is going to face severe economic consequences immediately, including on the pipeline.
Ric Grenell, the former ambassador to Germany and also the former director of national intelligence, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Logan.